good to be with you here on this Monday edition of the Ed Schultz Internet Broadcast, brought to you by Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team. Hey, I'm all on board with Black Lives Matter. I get it. And not that I've got to show a resume, but I have been exposed, rightfully so, enriched by Black lives in my lifetime. Now, I realize I'm a 61-year-old fat white guy, but I went to a black high school. I'm a product of force busing for racial equality. I think that when I was in front of the camera, I was pushing hard for social justice in America. But I don't get what Black Lives Matter is trying to achieve when they do what they did on Saturday to Bernie Sanders in Seattle. Now, let me clarify. I'm a Sanders guy. I would rather have him be president of the United States than anybody else who's out there. I believe that he is truly a candidate that will try to change things if he is in a position to do so. I believe that he would go farther than Barack Obama ever went when it comes to black youth unemployment in this country. I believe that he would do something about the criminal justice system. I believe that he would do something in a big way when it comes to affirmative action. That's who Bernie Sanders is. That's who he's been for the last 50 years of his entire career. But now there's this picture being painted that Bernie doesn't get it, to the point where Black Lives Matter does stuff like they did on Saturday. Listen to this. This is Saturday, when protesters from Black Lives Matter, the movement, interrupted an event where Sanders was getting ready to speak. Now, my question is Bernie Sanders not reachable? Is he a guy that Black Lives Matter can't sit down with and say, we want you to talk about this at every stop you go to. We want you to focus on this. This is what we need. This is what our goals are. Instead, the people who are out supporting Bernie Sanders have to leave because the rally's been disrupted. I'm at a loss this morning. What does that accomplish? And how does that recruit me to feel better about what Black Lives Matters, the movement, is all about? I think their method is wrong. I think their heart is in the right place, but I don't think this is going to win people over. This is the scene in Seattle.
Thank you, Seattle, for being one of the most progressive cities in the United States of America.
We want an opportunity to address. We want an opportunity on the way.
Well, ask him.
Get him and check when we're shutting this event down. If you do not listen to her, your event will be shut down right now. Right now. Your decision. Make a decision now.
Okay, the video of that is rather interesting. An organizer for the event says that they would let the protesters speak when Senator Sanders was finished, but of course the protesters screamed at the organizer until he finally relents, and Senator Sanders does what? He leaves the stage.
We are going to let you on the mic. Okay. All right, so we are trying to be reasonable. We are trying to be reasonable. We are trying to be reasonable. We are trying. We're going to let you on the mic. We are going to give you the mic.
Let us speak.
We will, after Senator Sanders. After Senator Sanders. After Senator Sanders. After Senator Sanders. After Senator Sanders.
Do not tell me what to do.
After Senator Sanders.
Sit down.
After Senator Sanders.
Sit down.
Okay. All right.
Let her speak.
All right.
Let her speak.
All right. We're shutting it down. You are shutting it down. You are disrupting this event.
They did the right thing. And I don't think they recruited one person in the crowd to get empathy when it comes to what it's like to be black in America. And I'm disappointed in this because I think that Senator Sanders is reachable. I think that he is, no question, a guy that has got a record of civil rights. And afterwards, after the event, he said he wanted to talk about the issues they were presenting, including the fact that Americans are sick of seeing unarmed black people shot and killed.
Let
it's unfortunate because among other things, I wanted to talk about the issue of black lives, of the fact that the American people are tired of seeing unarmed African Americans shot and killed.
I want some insight on this from a guy I respect big time. Michael Eric Dyson, author, contributing opinion writer for the New York Times, MSNBC political analyst, and professor at Georgetown University. Dr. Dyson, good to have you with us.
My big brother Ed, always great to be with you, my friend.
Help me, brother.
You know, look, it is extremely uncomfortable, let's be honest, to have the interruption of an avowedly progressive candidate for the presidency on many issues, and including on racial justice, to be interrupted. But what's interesting is that, so I admit that, I acknowledge that the process of interruption is as unruly a feature of, protest against social injustice as one might imagine. But the next day, Bernie Sanders, to his credit, released a platform on his website that addressed the issue of racial justice in a much more progressive, a much more systematic, and a much more detailed manner than he had done before. So putting aside just for a second, although I'll come right back to that, the issue of whether or not the young black people in Black Lives Matter were right, the point is that Bernie Sanders stepped up to the plate. What could he have done? He could have kvetched. He could have been bitter. He could have said, this will never work. He could have said, I'm on your side. What the hell are you doing? What he did instead was something that cannot be denied by any future Black Lives Matters protesters, and has put him solidly in the game, so to speak, by releasing a serious agenda for ending racial inequality in this country. And not only did he tweet out on the anniversary of Michael Brown the next day, he hired Simone Sanders, a black criminal justice advocate, to be his national press secretary. So Bernie Sanders, while a lot of other people have gotten upset for him and mad about what's going on, and perhaps even rightfully so, because that process can never be seen as uncomplicated, Bernie Sanders has responded like a champ, I would argue.
Well,
and I think that's extremely important.
It is important, and I'm not mad at anybody. I was just confused because I think that
you. I'm not talking about you. Let me tell you something.
Yeah.
Let me just not that you need it, but let me interrupt you here for a second.
Yeah.
Like the Black Lives Matter. You are a hero in many black communities across this country. I ain't talking about what somebody told me. I'm telling you what I know. Everywhere when I have the honor of sitting in for you and hosting for you, black people love you. Why? Because you consistently, I don't want to say you undersold yourself when you said you spoke about social injustice. You spoke about specifically racial injustice as well. You addressed it. You articulated it. So you have no reason, even if you were upset, that's your right and privilege. You have earned your ability to say what you have to say. So I wasn't talking about you there, but I think that, look, I even question some of the practices and some of the routines of Black Lives Matter, not because I'm not on their side. I'm squarely on their side. And I think what they're doing is an amazing reflection of the discourteousness and disrespect with which black people have been treated. They are outraged and angered. Perhaps they flummox the very people that ostensibly are on their side. So they say, like, cool down, calm down, Bernie's on your side. But the reality is that now that they've pushed forward and done what they've done, Bernie Sanders, I guess I want to underscore, just how well he's responded and how he has quickly evolved on this issue. Not that he wasn't already historically addressing it, but that in this moment, instead of being, reactionary, the man has stepped up to the plate. So those in the future, tomorrow, who would try to interrupt the Bernie Sanders event, Bernie Sanders is doing, putting it on paper, talking about what he's going to do, talking about how he will contribute to this, how he will address specifically the issue of criminal justice reform. And when you said earlier about, doing more than Barack Obama, yes, because Barack Obama was forced after several years, and that's been my consistent critique against Obama, is that he's not addressed this. So So you're absolutely right about that. And Bernie Sanders has stepped up to the plate and responded, I think, in a very vigorous and a very critical and a very clear fashion about what this challenge has been, and nobody can therefore back him down.
All right. Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, great friend. Always good to visit. Always like your insight and take, and I appreciate your counsel on this. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, my friend, for always standing up and doing the right thing. Love you for that, sir.
All right, brother. Michael Eric Dyson, author, contributing opinion writer, New York Times, MSNBC political analyst, and great friend of mine. Now this.
Hey, folks, you've heard me talk about BioGreen Clean. I'm going to show you right now on my airplane just how tough this is. I want you to keep in mind, chemical-free, 100% plant-derived, biodegradable. It is the safest cleaner that you can get, and it's the most effective. Go to our website, wegoted.com, or go to biogreenclean.com, www.biogreenclean, and order today.
We perpetuate a culture of crime all the way from Wall Street right down to the main street in our hometowns. It's worse than it has been since FDR took control of the problem and said we can't count on industry taking care of the American labor. They probably have already engaged into some type of criminal cover-up, and the law prohibits the government from even doing anything about it.
Catch America's lawyer Mike Papantonio on YouTube at youtube.com/GoLeftTV.
Subscribe to the Ed Schultz podcast today. Simply log on to iTunes, search for Ed Schultz, and click the subscribe button to have the show delivered to your preferred listening device daily, free of charge. Rate and review the podcast to tell us how we're doing. More details at wegoted.com.
You can get it every day at wegoted.com, rawstory.com, ringofireradio.com. The Ed Schultz Internet broadcast. As many views and downloads as I had on TV. Crazy business. It's amazing where it's all going. Good to have you with us on this Monday. True progressives out there know what Bernie Sanders is doing to this campaign. And when I say campaign, I'm talking about the entire 2016 run to figure out who is going to run this country next. And the fact of the matter is his positions have been relentless for years in the progressive arena. Notice that Black Lives Matter doesn't seem to be doing this to other candidates. And I haven't seen anything like what I saw in Seattle on videotape over the weekend happen at a Clinton event. Maybe it's too managed, or any of the Republicans, or if the Black Lives Matter group has just given up on Republicans. Look at where we are as liberals and where they are as conservatives. And I don't care if it's an us versus them. There's a reality to this. Who do you want on the next Supreme Court? The fact is they're talking about Donald Trump cherishing women. Okay, that's where they are. They've got an entertainer still leading in the polls, I might add. But the Sanders movement is what people are paying attention to. 22,000 people show up in Portland. 15,000 in Seattle, and the mainstream media refuses to call it a movement because I think they're afraid of it. Katrina Vanden Heuvel with us, editor, part owner of The Nation magazine. Katrina, great to have you with us.
Ed, thank you for having me on. I'm glad you're on the cutting edge of media change.
Thank you. When do we call this a movement?
Okay, so here's let me just step back for a minute. First of all, we're living in movement times. So it's very exciting to have a campaign that understands the movement and wants to be part of a movement, the inside-outside. But, you know, Black Lives Matter, Ed, is becoming the most important movement for racial justice since the 60s. It's leaderless in many ways. It's not conventional. It's decentralized. What happened in Seattle in disrupting Bernie Sanders' rally, you know, I think what's happening is some of that may have been anger towards some of the organizers, local organizers. But I think what's really important is often, you know, the progressive left cherishes its friends, its leaders, and wants them to be pushed and moved. Effective activism requires both carrots and sticks. And I think at Netroots Nation last month, there was some justification for saying to Bernie Sanders, hey, we understand you know, inequality is your issue, but let's fuse it. And he has. He spoke at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, July 30th, gave a brilliant speech on the importance of fusing structural racism, with the inequality, the grotesque inequality in this country. He's released a platform for racial justice. Your listeners should go to BernieSanders.com. He's speaking clearly because he has been moved. That's what we want on the progressive left. We want movements to move candidates. So I think it's a moment for the Black Lives Matter folks and the Bernie Sanders campaign to maybe have some conversations to understand how important this issue is for Bernie Sanders. And
no doubt.
That's what I think there needs to be a dialogue. He is the platform for racial justice is really a Black Lives Matter platform. I understand the frustration of those who were out in Seattle, and I think those in the crowd who were frustrated because they didn't hear Bernie Sanders, I think there was some bad stuff going on between the groups.
Yeah.
But the crowds you mentioned, these are movement crowds. Why isn't the mainstream media covering it, Ed? We know why. I mean, the mainstream media isn't really equipped to cover movements, and I think we need to kind of keep talking about it so attention is paid.
I don't think they understand movements. I really don't. And when you say equipped, they're not on the inside getting the heart and the pulse of what this is all about. And I think they're in denial that they've been sold such a bill of goods that this is the way it's going to go, and I don't buy into it.
This is a movement moment. It's also a moment when people are fed up with establishment politics, a media that doesn't give credence to movement power. But what's going on is also there is a different media, which is speaking to the movement, which is covering the movement. So I think it's a kind of tectonic shift at this time, and this election Bernie Sanders is participating in. Bernie Sanders didn't fully understand what he would trigger. He's surprised by these crowds too. Now, how those crowds translate into real strength is going to be interesting to see. My understanding through people who are covering the campaign for the nation is that the infrastructure, so to speak, is not as strong as it might be to handle what the campaign is in these crowds.
But this is, if you want purity in politics, this is a guy who's going to give it to you. He won't take the PAC money. He is relentlessly attacking Citizens United, unlike any other candidate. He talks consistently about campaign finance reform and the wealthy in this country running the country and controlling the elections. I don't know how much more pure it gets than that. He won't run a negative ad. He's never run a negative ad, and he won't take the PAC money. You
raised the question about how does the Sanders campaign translate this? How does it translate this enthusiasm into electoral victory? One thing it needs to do is it needs to speak to the African Americans in the Democratic Party. And I think, again, people should go read his racial justice platform, which is in his heart, not just on paper or on a screen. But he needs to fuse these very important messages about the grotesque inequality in this country, the corruption of money, with the structural racism that is afflicting our nation and millions of people, African Americans and communities. So I think that is I don't know if there's a dialogue underway with some of the, movement organizers of Black Lives Matter, with Latino communities. But we're living, I don't need to tell you, Ed, we're living in a multiracial country, and those changes, the Bernie Sanders crowds are terrific. The vibrancy, the passion, the enthusiasm. But I think to open it up a little is going to be important, too.
We are living in movement times. It is about racial justice, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all unfolds moving forward. And I just want your quick take. I mean, I think this nomination is wide open. We're a long way from the finish line. Your thoughts, Katrina?
I totally agree, Ed. I think, first of all, I never say never in politics, but especially in these times of seismic shifts. And I think anyone who tells you how it's going to turn out doesn't understand the moment we're in. So I think it's open, and Bernie Sanders is speaking for millions of people, and it's exciting to see the crowds and the attention to issues, Ed, which for so long have been off. The mainstream. I keep coming back to one thing because you're so prominent in the media, Ed, but think that Bernie Sanders was on Meet the Press for the first time only last year. John McCain is the most frequent visitor on that show. What does that say about the imbalance in our politics?
No doubt. Katrina, always a pleasure. Great to visit. All great work at The Nation. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Katrina Vanden Heuvel, editor, part owner of The Nation. Trump commentary when we come back after this. It's time to continue our conversation about mechanical insulation. Mechanical insulation is for the piping systems in our nation's commercial and industrial facilities. Facility owners are burning up billions of dollars through the lack of mechanical insulation on these piping systems. Call the iSave team. Insulation saves America valuable energy, and this team of energy conservation specialists is shovel-ready to save you money. Visit iSaveTeam.org to have a specialist give your plant an energy audit.
The Ed Schultz Internet broadcast is brought to you by the Ring of Fire radio show. Listen to the Ring of Fire weekends on radio stations across the country. Get more information and the news of the day at ringofireradio.com.
Communication Workers of America bring you this production. With progressive allies, CWA is building a mass movement to restore workers' bargaining rights and reclaim our democracy. They got a great website. Check it out, cwa-union.org. From New York City this day and from the Big Apple again tomorrow, and back to the middle of the country and onto the campaign trail to see what folks are talking about. Well, on the Democratic side, there's a lot of curiosity about where this Sanders thing is going to go. A lot of curiosity about why Hillary Clinton can't get positive traction in poll after poll. She's leading, but she's going in the wrong direction. The Trump factor. I think Donald Trump has ripped the scab off the Republican Party. It's continuing to bleed, and nobody knows how to stop it. And when he made his announcement and threw barbs at the Mexican neighbors we have and talked about immigration, I knew, in fact, I turned to a producer who was with me at Trump's announcement and said, this is going to play for months. And it has. And so I thought that Trump was targeted in a big way the other night in the Fox debate, watched by millions, a record crowd. I thought it was a good debate, a good discussion. And the latest NBC News polling that came out after the debate the other night shows that Trump is still in a very commanding position. And so this dust-up, this conversation that he had, this back and forth with Fox host Megyn Kelly, hasn't hurt him a bit. In an interview on Friday on CNN, Trump had this to say.
Well, I just don't respect her as a journalist. I have no respect for her. I don't think she's very good. I think she's highly overrated. She gets out and she
hold
starts
it right
asking
there.
me
Hold it. Hold. Trump is a New Yorker. Trump tells it like it is. That's how it is in this city. There's unvarnished opinions from anybody that you stop and talk to on the street. He's a New Yorker. This is how he is. And to the middle of the country, it's refreshing. This isn't about whether the country is going to like Megyn Kelly over Donald Trump. This is about this guy raises his hand and says, yeah, I can't guarantee I'm going to support the rest of these guys up here because I think they're wrong on stuff. It's the independence that is the draw. Let's play it again.
Well, I just don't respect her as a journalist. I have no respect for her. I don't think she's very good. I think she's highly overrated. She gets out and she starts asking me all sorts of ridiculous questions. And, you could see there was blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her wherever.
Let's take a look.
She's a lightweight. I couldn't care less about her. In fact, you're competing against her and I'm doing your show. That's interesting.
So if conservatives want to continue to pick fights with Donald Trump, it isn't going to affect the polls. Now, this guy, Eric Erickson, who's a right-winger, and I don't know what red state is, and he's on the cables from time to time. He's a right-winger. He thinks that he is the thought god of the right wing in this country. So this guy holds a conservative shindig over the weekend and tries to put Trump in the corner.
If you haven't heard, I disinvited Donald Trump. I've got my wife here, I've got my daughter here, I've got 800 friends of mine here. It's a family-friendly program, and if he's not going to clarify that this isn't what he meant, I don't think I want him at my event.
Well, who the hell are you, Eric Erickson? You're not mainstream. You're far right wing. What Trump is tapping into is the independent voters who enjoy his unvarnished opinion on things and is willing to restate what he said previously. And people are just going to have to render their own judgment. And apparently in the polls, they are. It's not affecting Trump one bit. And Jeb Bush, who was like wallpaper the other night at the debate, also tried to throw some flame on the fire.
Come on. Give me a break. I mean, do we want to win? Do we want to insult 53% of all voters? What Donald Trump said is wrong. That is not how we win elections. And worse yet, that is not how you bring people together to solve problems. That is not the way to do it. So your decision, I think, was the right one. Mr. Trump ought to apologize.
Okay, everybody's got to apologize. Let's just everybody apologize to everybody. There was no agenda whatsoever from the Fox people at all. Donald Trump was on that stage to serve, correct? He wasn't there to become a target, because certainly he wasn't treated fairly, because none of the other candidates got that kind of treatment. You tell me that we couldn't dig into Huckabee's past? You telling me that we couldn't dig into Bush's past? You telling me, well, I mean, so they dig into Trump, but nobody else. People are figuring this out. And they understand what the agenda is of the conservative media. They don't want Trump, and people are rebelling, and they're supporting him. On CNN State of the Union, Trump says he cherishes women.
I cherish women. I want to help women. I'm going to do things for women that no other candidate will be able to do. And it's very important to me. So she was very angry because I bested her with a question that was a very unfair question. So she was very angry, but I was speaking about her. I said blood was pouring from her eyes or out of her eyes, which is a very common statement. And by the way, I said the same thing about Chris Wallace.
That's right.
Nobody said anything.
You did.
But I said the exact same thing about Chris Wallace.
But then you said she had blood. You said blood coming out of her wherever.
I said no. I said and blood was pouring for wherever. Because I wanted to finish the sentence, because I went on to something. I wanted to get off of the whole thing and get back onto the subject of jobs or whatever we were talking to about right after that. I said nothing wrong whatsoever.
So Erickson,
and by the way, Jake, let me just say this. Only a deviant would say that what I said was what they were referring to, because nobody can make that statement. You almost have to be sick to sort of put that together.
You know, to the conservative movement, if Trump is so irrelevant, why is everybody just jumping in line to interview him? This is the Ed Schultz Internet Broadcast. Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team bring you this production. We're back tomorrow.